Today's Gemara in Yevamos Daf Ches, we'll learn for this month, the month of Adar Beis, has been generously sponsored as Chosr Ili Neshama for Rav Shlomo ben Rameir in conjunction with the release of the new Sefer, the laws of Chanukah and Purim. A few days left of Purim, I hope, and many people get their hands on the Sefer. And the learning of the Sefer and the learning of the Daf should bring a tremendous Aliyah Neshama to Rav Shlomo ben Rameir as he's Oila to a higher place in Gan Eden Shel Amayla. And we're holding on the bottom of Zayin Amid Beis, and again, I welcome anyone that would like to send in a refuah shlema, a shidduch, or anything else. Please send it in free of charge. We keep the list open for anyone that would need a Yeshua. If you want to sponsor a specific day or a specific daf or a specific month, we could do that as well. Please reach out. And we're holding in the bottom of Zayin Amid Beis, the last line. And we're in the middle of a larger discussion, trying to figure out why we need the pasuk of Aleah. What was the hava mina that in the case of Ereva, in the case of the Chamisha Seinashim in the Mishnah, that would fall to Yibam, they would be allowed to do Yibam. So yesterday we had an interesting answer after trying to say the Chalaisa saying that didn't work, trying Kavul Chaymer and that didn't work. We went to a new avenue and the Gemara first tried the Gimel Midas and that didn't work. And we went to Mamatzinu and that was where we're holding right now. The Gemara wants to suggest that just like Isha's Ach, your brother's wife generally is off limits, yet Yibam allows it, so do all the other Arayas. And the Gemara asked the obvious question, all other Arayas carry multiple Isurim, whereas Isha's Ach is only one Isur. And to that the Gemara answered, Hoyel ve'ishtri ishtri. No, once there's a heter, the heter applies always. There's a heter for Isha's Ach, there will be heter for Bitoy as well. Even though Bitoy has multiple Yisurim, Achos Isha has multiple Yisurim, doesn't make a difference. Once we have a heter, once it goes, everything is mutter. The Gemara said, what's the source to that? And that's what we ended yesterday with learning the source from Mitzayra. What was the source of Mitzayra that finishes the 7 days of the Hayra? The day before Pesach, that day he goes to the mikvah. The next day on Erev Pesach, what's he supposed to do right now? He's called a Mechusar Kippurim. He's supposed to bring a carbon, go up to the Beis HaMikdash, and have the blood sprinkled on his big thumb and big toe. But on that day, something else happened. Unfortunately, he saw a carry, he became tummy again. So what does he do? He goes to the mikvah, and he's still allowed to go up. Why is he allowed to go up? He's what we call a Tful Yaim. He shouldn't be allowed to go up to the Beis HaMikdash right now. So explain to Rabbi Yochanan, the reason is, once we allow one who has some level not completely pure. Why is he not completely pure? Because he didn't have the matan damim on the boyin yadai and the boyin raglai. He didn't have the blood applied to him. He's a mechusar kippurim, and yet he's allowed to go up to the Beis HaMikdash. So too hotel lekeriyav, even though he has an additional level of tumah on him from the keri, we still allow him to go up. But now in the last line of Zayin Amid Beis, the Gemara asks perhaps the obvious question: Mi dami l'd'ula. Is this really equivalent and comparable to the case of Ula as we turn over to Chesam and Aleph? Teinach, it makes sense. Heicha dinasa meis. In a case where the brother married the meis. Now, of course, it does not mean that he married someone that's dead. That's the way of referring to the brother that dies. The nasa meis, the brother that married his wife, then he died, he got married first. And then the brother who married the sister got married afterwards. So that at some level we can understand the migud ishtri isser ishasach ishtri nami isser achois isha. So now I can understand what came first. First came first isser ishasach. Because why? Because Reuven got married. And then after Reuven got married, then Shimon got married. So now when Reuven is nifter and Shimon wants to do Yibam, so just like the Isra Isha's Ach becomes mutter, I could at some level fathom that the Isra Achais Isha also falls away as well. But that's only if that's the progression. But what about in the other way? Elanasa Chai. What if Shimon married his wife first? And then Reuven got married. Which means that the Isra Achlis Isha, the other Isra, we'll just call it for simplistic purposes, came first. Then Reuven gets married. Isra Achlis Isha Kadim. It says the Gemara, so that Isra comes first. So how are you going to tell me that when the brother dies, they both fall off? It doesn't work. That Isra was there to start. What's allowing it to fall away? Meaning, even if you're going to go with the rule of Hayel Ishtri, that when something is mutter, everything falls away. But it says the Gemara, it has to have some level of progression. It has to work. So if that Isra of Isha's Achais Isha came first, second, and Isha's Ach comes first, then I understand. Just like Ish's ach falls off, it takes with it achos isha. But says the Gemara, if it's the reverse, what are you going to tell me? Question number 1. And it says the Gemara further, Va'afilu, and even in case number 1, Nasa Meis Nami, even in that case, Tena Achecha de Nasa Meis, in the case that Reuven marries his wife, Umeis, then Reuven dies, Ve'achar Kach Nasa Chai, and then Shimon gets married. I understand, the Chazilei de Beni Obeni, there was a moment of time before Shimon marries the sister. There was a moment of time that Shimon was allowed to be married to this woman. Reuven marries a woman. Reuven dies. Reuven's brother, of course, can marry that woman. Why? Because there's no relation at all. Then Reuven's brother, Shimon, goes and marries this woman's sister. So now there's this new Isser of Achos Isha. So that case, that someone like understand, because there was a moment of time that there was an allowance for Shimon to marry that woman. Ella nasa meis, v'loy meis. If Reuven gets married and he's not dead yet, v'achar nasa chai, and Shimon marries the sister, lo yischaz leklal. There's no allowance at all. There's never a moment of time that Shimon was allowed to that woman. So why would you think Hayel Ishtri? And the Gemara now proves this point. Miloi dam, miloi moide Ula. Would Ula himself, Ula who was the source, Ula was the one that proved to us from the case of Mitzaira that we say this rule of Hayel Ishtri. Ula himself is going to admit that if the progression happened like we just said, that it's not going to work. Why? Shemroi carry Belel Shmini. Let's remember, what was the case of Mitzaira? The case of Mitzaira was that 7 days passed and everything is fine. On day number 7, he goes to the mikvah. On day number 8, when all that is left is Mechusar Kippurim, all that is left is the Karban, then he sees Carrie. But what happened if the night before? What happened if it came Tommy the night before? Would Ula not admit that if the night before he saw Carrie, then he would not be allowed to go up to the Beis HaMikdash? Why? Because there was never a moment of time that there was an allowance to go up and bring Baal Karban. Meaning, since in the Ula's case, 7 days passed, he went to the mikvah, day number 8 came, there's a moment in the morning he could have gone to the Beis HaMikdash right now, brought the Karban, took the blood and put on his thumb and toe, and then instead of doing that, unfortunately sees Kari. That's when Ula says his massive Chiddush, Hayel Ishtri. That makes sense. Because there was a moment he could have gone there. But let's say there was never that moment. Let's say the night before he became fully tar, to that extent, he saw Kari. Ula would admit he can never do it. So says the Gemara, multiple reasons why, in case of Yibam, we cannot use this rule of Hayel Ishtri, and we're back to square one. What is the reason? We the pasuk of Aleho to teach me that all the other arayis are not allowed to do Yibam. What's the hava? What's the thought process? Says the Gemara, you're right. Ella, about 10 lines down, first one line is the Havi. You know we need the pasuk for Heicha din nasa meis v'meis v'achach nasa chai. Concedes the Gemara an interesting concession. We need the pasuk of Allah for one case, only for the case that the brother that got married, he died, then the other brother gets married. It says the Gemara, and therefore that is the one case that you need the pasuk of Allah. If not, then you don't need the pasuk of Allah at all. That's the first answer. So let's just realize what the Gemara just answered. Absolutely bombshell. We're holding a Daf Ches. We've been spending the last 6 days figuring out what this pasuk of Allah is there for. Says the Gemara, we need it for one simple case. But okay, for that case, in the case that the brother gets married, then dies, and then Nasa Chai, since there's a moment of time that it's allowed, that's the case that you would have thought that the Erva could do Yibam. So we need a pasuk teaching me not. Says the Gemara, Iba Yisema, another teretz, why we need this pasuk. Asya be'ekesha mid Rav Yoina. Because we would have thought that there's a hekesh of Rav Yoina that's going to teach us that potentially the other arayis are allowed to do Yibam. So we need the pasuk of Allah teaching me not. The Amar Rav Yoina says, Rav Yoina v'tem Rabuna Breit Rav Yeshua Amar Kros says in the Torah, Kichol asher yasem nikolat eva se'ila v'nechrasa. If anyone does any of these abominations, v'nechrasa, the Gekari will be cut off from Klal Yisrael. Hokshu kol arayis kulam ishazach. So in this pasuk, all arayis are equated to one level, that they're all the same level of an ishazach. And we learn now, ma ishazach shari of kol arayis nam yisharion. So just like ishazach is mutter, just like the brother's wife is mutter by yibum, so too all arayis are mutter. And therefore, because Rachman alel, that's what we need the pasuk of alel to teach us not. So because of the akish of Rav Nasan, Rav Yoina, the Rav Yoina learned that all arayis are under one umbrella. That's why we need a pasuk. A second reason why we need a pasuk of aleha. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Acham idifti leRavina mechti. Let's figure out if what you just said is logical. Kol arayis equal like shinu leishazach. All arayis you could either equate to ishazach, v'equal like shinu lachois isha. We have two choices in front of us. We know ishazach is forbidden, is mutter in Yibam. We know Achais Isha is Aser in Yibam. Achais Isha is the sister, Ishazach is the brother. Let's say that actually more accurately. Ishazach is the brother's wife, Achais Isha is the wife's sister. So Ishazach is the quintessential case of Yibam, and that's where there's an allowance. Achais Isha is a regular case of Isser, that's the sister. So as Rav Acham Yidifti L'Ravina, 1 second, we have a toss-up over here. We have 15 cases that we're trying to figure out which case that they're more comparable to. Equal action leishazach, equal action lachos isha. My chaz is the action lachos isha, action leishazach. What is the reason that you're saying once we found the heter by ishazach, everything should be like that heter? Maybe everything should be like a chos isha and be aser. Iba Yisema says the Ravina 2 different answers to figure out Rav Acham Yidifti's question. Iba Yisema lekula lechomra lechomra makshinan. Number one is, anytime that you want to know if we have a kula or a chumrah, what would you go for? Of course, we say we go l'chumrah. Iba is ema, and therefore that's the reason why we assume that they're forbidden. Iba is ema achatrei surah v'achatrei surah. So here in the case of the Yevamos, who's achos isha, the sister, there's 2 isurim. V'achatrei surah. Here all the other arayis is also 2 isurim. Utrei mitrei alfina. Does that make sense? So we should learn out all the arayis in the case of achos isha. Just like achos isha is aser, so too other arayis is aser. Avol halcha chadi surah utrei. Avol halcha chadi surah. By Isha's ach is only 1 isra, and this is reminiscent of what we said yesterday when we first brought down the Mamatzinu, and we said, how could you equate anything to Isha's ach? There's only 1 isra. Well, the other isurim were 2, and then we try to say whole history, everything is mutter. But the Gemara is going full circle and saying now, if you have a choice which one to do, of course, compare 2 to 2, which is also not 2 to 1. Trei mechada lo yalfinan, and therefore says the Gemara, we have 2 different reasons why we would have thought that it's mutter. Now we have a new pshat. Comes along Rava. So we have a slight answer to our question of Aleha. Now comes along Rava and says a different answer. Says Rava Amar Erva. Loi tzricha kra. Says Rava, we do not need the erva themselves, doesn't need a pasuk. Go back all the way to Daf Gimel, and we thought that we needed a pasuk of allowed to teach us that the erva is allowed to do yibum. Meaning the hava mina would be that the erva could do yibum, and the kamash malan of allows that it's forbidden. Says Rava, no, that's not true. Erva loi tzricha kra. Why? Why not? Because the nasei does not push over loisei sheish v'karis, which we right now know already. We spent many days trying to prove it and we didn't get anywhere. So ki yitzrich kra. So what's the whole pasuk of Allah teaching me? Lemeisar tzara. The pasuk is teaching me about the tzara. The pasuk is teaching me to forbid the tzara. That's the Havamina. You would have a Havamina that the co-wife is mother, comes along Allah and teaches you night. Says the Gemara, "V'erva lo tzricha kra." Does the erva not need a pasuk? V'atana we learned in a brayse Einli Elohi mishum sarasa Einli Elohi. The brayse said explicitly Einli Elohi that the pasuk is coming to teach us about she herself, not only about the tzara. Answers the Gemara, no, we're not moved by that. Mishum sarasa, it just meant because of the tzara. V'katani Einli Elohin. Says the Gemara, but the whole brayse said because of they mishum sarasehen. So Rav is saying we have to switch the whole drasha, go back to Gilman base, switch the whole drasa, the whole allow is not teaching me anything about the erev, about the woman herself. It's only teaching me about the tzara and the tzara sehem. Ask the Gemara Tashema, about 15 lines on the bottom. The first word on the line is Tashema. Rabbi Omer says, Rabbi V'lokach v'locha v'yama v'yama. Says in a brayso about Yibam, instead of v'lokach, and you should take, the Torah says v'locha, take her. Instead of v'yibim, and you should do Yibam, says v'yibma. You should do Yibam with her. What's that pasuk teaching me? Says the brayso, lesser saras v'arayis. The pasuk is coming to teach, to forbid both the tsarais and arayis. Arayis. So what do we see? We see that we need a pasuk to forbid arayis. You, Rabbi, just said that no, the arayis is pashit. Asay is never deichalois. The whole pasuk of Alel is only for the tsaris. But we see clearly in this brayso that we need a pasuk for the arayis. Answers the Gemara, Ema lesser tsaris shel arayis. That's what the brayso means. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? V'trei kroik kanasava. There's two psukim. My lav chad le'erva v'chad le'tzara. Says Gemara, no, lo, I did le'tzara. They both come teach you about the tzara. Chad. L'misar tzara b'makom mitzvah. So why do we need two psukim about the co-wife? One to say that b'makom mitzvah, that when they fall to yibum and there's an erva situation, not only is that erva forbidden, but the tzara as well, the co-wife is forbidden. V'chad l'mishrei tzara shloi b'makom mitzvah. Something that we spoke about way back when, that when it's not a makom mitzvah, that when Reuven has two wives and Reuven dies, even if one of his wife is related to a man, we'll call that man John. John might be related to one of Reuven's wives, but the other wife, John's allowed to marry. Nothing to do with Yibam. A random case. Reuven, a beautiful man, has two wives. Reuven dies. John, a wonderful guy, happens to be related to one of Reuven's wives. So could John marry this wife of Reuven? Absolutely not. He's related to her. But could John marry the co-wife? The answer is yes. So that's what the pasuk teaches me. One, that in a situation of Yibam it's forbidden. Two, that it's in a non-situation of Yibam it's going to be allowed. Says the Gemara, my taima, what is the reason? How do we see from the psukim what you just said? V'yibe v'yibama. V'makam yibam udasira tzara. Shlob makam yibam sharia tzara. That it's only going to be forbidden makam yibam. If there's no yibam, it's going to be mutter. Namar Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, I like this answer. Masizana mideka. Our Mishnah is meduyak, like you just said, Ravina. Ikatani chamisha sinashim poitrei tzara yisayim. So that the Sarah Yisayim are pater. Vilu paitrais u paitrais like Atani Shmamina. Says Ravina, it's clear from the Mishnah that the Chiddush is not about the woman herself. It's about the Sarah, just like Rava answered. And that is how Rava reinterprets the entire last six plot that allows when we talk about the Sarah and not about the woman herself. Says the Gemara, Umay Shana Erva Deloit Tzrichakra. Rava, you just told me, you were 6 lines from the bottom. The Erva doesn't need a pasuk. Who needs a pasuk? The tzara, the co-wife. Ask the Gemara, Rava, my shana, what's the difference? The erva, the Lord tzricha, why? Ask the Gemara 1 second. Tzara nami lo tiba hikra, so tzara shouldn't need a pasuk either. We have the same kares on the tzara. So Rava, why are you differentiating between the woman herself and the co-wife? This is what Rava means. Even the tzara doesn't need a pasuk. Tzara doesn't need a pasuk. So what's the pasuk of Alel for? You know we need the pasuk for as we turn over to Chesed Beis lemishrei tzara shaloi b'makom mitzvah. Meaning to say that the co-wife is forbidden. That's pashit. It's a asay. It's a lois asay sheish bakares. So of course it's forbidden, just like the erva themselves. So what do we need a pasuk of Alel to teach me? That shaloi b'makom mitzvah. In that case of John that we just spoke about, that the tzara is allowed. My taima. What is the reason? Where do we see in the pasuk? Amar Kroi Alel says the pasuk. Alel, which teaches us b'makom aleho udasira, that when there's an aleho, when there's a yibum, that's when there's a forbiddance of the tzara, the co-wife. B'makom aleho sharia. So says Rava, the whole pasuk of Alel not only is it not talking about the woman herself, it's really not even talking about the tzara. It's teaching me a din that when there's no yibum, that's the tzara is allowed. Amrli Rabbi Bar Chama Rava, 4 lines down, Chesed Beis, Ema Erva Gufei Shlei b'makom mitzvah Tishra. history, why don't we say that the pasuk is talking about the erva when there's no yibum is also mutter? If you're telling that this whole pasuk of Allah is teaching me not a din of yibum, a din of non-yibum, that the co-wife in a case where there's no yibum is allowed to marry the brother, maybe we should say the same thing about the erva. We should say that the pasuk is teaching me in a non-situation of yibum, the brothers let him marry the erva. Says Rav of Lav Kabul Chaimru. 1 second. If the erva, when there is a mitzvah of yibum, it's still aser, even though you have that potential assay of yibum pushing away still, the loisa assay of the erva shish bakaris wins. Shaloi b'makei mitzvah sharia. If there's no yibum, if there's no assay, you have a havamina to think you could stop marrying an erva. What's the havamina? Of course it's aser. There's a loisa assay there. Amr Lei, he responds back. Says Rav Rachama, 1 second. What do you mean? This kusara is the same din. So what are you going to say about the tzara? Why in that case is it allowed? Amar Lei says Rava Alecha Amakra B'chayeho. A new pasuk. Based on what you just said, you know what the Torah says that you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister. Achayis Isha B'chayeho in her lifetime. Kol Sheb'chayeho. Any case that the sister is forbidden, always during her lifetime. And therefore, you're asking me that the tzara should be allowed. Shaloi b'makam yibam. You know why I know not? Because of b'chayeho. Says Rav Rachama back, Hai b'chayami b'yalei l'mutei lachar misa. Says Rav Rachama, no. B'chayeho, we need for something else. B'chayeho teaches me, lachar misa, that after one's wife dies, you're still not allowed to marry the sister. That's what B'chayah teaches me, not a din over here about Sarah. Says Rava, no, that we learned it out from a different pasuk. Says Rava Rachama, what do you mean? Even Isha l'chaysa, Hava Amina, I would have thought Nisgarsha Sharia. I would have thought that if they got divorced, it's going to be then you could marry the wife's sister. Says Rava Rachama, sticking to his guns. Where do you learn out the din about Tzara? Ella Amar Ravuna Bar Tachliva Mishmei Derava Trey Kroy Ksivi. We have two psukim. Tziv Yishal Chaytzal Tzikach Lisrar Uksiv Legalos Arvasa. The Chada one of them Mashma. The Chada Mashma. When it says Legalos Arvasa, that's referring to one of them is Aser. Okay, so which is Aser, which is Mutter. B'makei Mitzvah Shteim Asurois. Ibam Shalai b'makay mitzvah hi asura, but tzarasa mutares. Says the Gemara, classical kasha. How do you know? How do you know which is mutar, which is asur? I'll tell you the exact opposite. B'makay mitzvah hi asura, but tzarasa mutares. Maybe when there's a mitzvah, that's when the erva is asur, but the tzara is mutar. V'shalai b'makay mitzvah shteim asurais. Responds the Gemara and came l'yemar aleh. We would not need a pasuk of aleh, and that is how we know that it's only on the tzara the allowance shlei b'makam mitzvah. Amar le Rav Ashi the Rav Kahana mimai. How do you know what you're saying? The hayalel li yisura. And of course, these are always difficult. How the Gemara, the Havamina, it's Aser, where they teach me Heter, Isser. But I asked the Gemara 1 second, how do you know Allah is coming to teach me that it's Aser, maybe it's coming to teach me that it's Mutter. And this is what the Torah means. Neither he nor the tzara shaloi b'makam aleh in non-case of yibum. Aval b'makam aleh shteim mutarais. But maybe in the case of yibum, they're both mutar. Says the Gemara. Rav Kana responds and came legalois erva techada heichim mishkachas. So what's the case? B'makam mitzvah shteim mutarais. Yishaloi b'makam shteim asurais. And therefore, says the Gemara, we have to learn the pasuk like we suggested a moment ago, that in the case of yibum, both the achais isha, the wife's sister, and the tzara is aser. Shaloi b'makei mitzvah, the achais isha is aser, but the co-wife is going to be mutter, and that's why Rava reinterprets the entire last 6 plot in that the halal has nothing to do with the erva, the halal has to do with the tzara. The halal is teaching me not only about the tzara, but the tzara is mutter shaloi b'makei mitzvah. That is shitas Rava. Kufa says the Gemara. Let's go back a little bit for a few moments, starting the next piece of Gemara. Kufa. We're about 15 lines to the bottom, the 2 dots. Rebbe Omer. V'lokach v'locha v'yibay v'yimna. What does it say by Yibam? It doesn't say v'lokach, it says v'locha, take her. It doesn't say v'yibay, it says v'yimma, you should do Yibam to her. Lesser tzarais v'arayis. That was a brisa that taught us not only are the tzarais forbidden, but the arayis are forbidden in Yibum. Asks the Gemara, Midei Tzaros Ksiva Hacha? Does this pasuk say anything about Tzaros? How do you know? How did you know V'lakach V'lach of Yibev Yimma is a din about Tzaros? Where did you see Tzaros in the pasuk? Va'oyin, and furthermore, Tzaros militzar nafka. The word, the Isser of Tzaros, or the Heter, whichever way you want to look at it, we should learn out from V'litzar, like we learned all the way back in Gimlam and Beis. So why, Rebbe, do you need a new pasuk over here? Answers the Gemara, Litzar mafkale Rebbe lichler Rav Shimon. Rebbe learned the Litzar like the opinion of Rav Shimon. Sarah hacha ksiv. So says the Gemara, fine. So you learned Litzar like Rav Shimon. Like Rav Shimon, going back, as we're going to, not going back, we're going to get to Rav Shimon eventually. Says the Gemara, Tzara hacha ksiv. Still, where do you see Tzara in this pasuk? So now explains the Gemara, Hachi Kamra, this is how Rabbi learned the drasha. In Kelima krav lakach, my v'lacha. What's that extra hey? Kol hecha deika trei lechuchen. It's talking about a case where there's two potential takings. A taking of two co-wives. It's talking about a unique case where two co-wives fall to Yibam. Two calls fall to Yibam, and a case where they're going to be mutter. And you could potentially do both. Sharia, then it's going to be allowed. V'ilai. And if you're not going to take either one, then Tarvayu Asirin. They're both going to be forbidden. V'yibima. And you know what the extra 8 teaches me? And that is how Rabbi learned this drasha. We're going to pick it up over here. We're going to stop over here, Now the Gemara is going to continue the sheet of the Rabbanon and how the Rabbanon darshened up the pasuk way back when in Gimlam and Beis. But we'll leave that for the next year, which also will shed some clarity in Rebbe, who's the counterbalance of the Rabbanon in Mirza Hashem.